I keep sleepwalk dreaming you still love me. Then I wake up and remember I'm alone. I keep sleepwalk dreaming you still love me. I pretend you haven't blocked my number from your phone. Each night my stealing will make me make believe you love me still. I keep sleepwalk dreaming you still love me. Then I wake up and remember I'm alone. Last night you rang my doorbell in the morning. Then we were laughing, having coffee, you and I. Patio table seated, people watching. Then the gaucho with the latte shows up, ramble off again. Another fitful night, one more somnambulistic flight of honey. I keep sleepwalk dreaming you still love me. Till I wake up and remember I'm alone. Did still love me,
but I don't love you.
the stars above me would twinkle and shine. If you did still love me,
But I don't love
the
you.
moon would hold me, the tide would roll me like a bubble-yo. On the piano in the parlor with the nocturnes every night, your phosphorescent gown begins to glow with the light. And as my opera glass is filled to overflowing, I spy the spigots on your Steinway start to flood the concert hall. When I run to get 'em off, that's when my dream comes to a stop. Oh honey, I keep sleepwalk dreaming you still love me, till I wake up and remember I'm alone. Sleepwalking alone.
Hey friends, we're thanks so much for joining us. We are very close to getting started here, but we've got a few more folks to get in. So bear with us for a couple more minutes. Oh, and in the meantime, please enjoy the amazing red session. At least I hope you are.
Love getting prices that are lower than low on food that's fresher than fresh? Then shop at Kroger. We give you more ways to save on the fresh you love with tools like the Kroger app, where you can find personalized coupons.
All right, that is absolutely my cue to stop sharing music. My apologies for the ads. I'm a cheapskate, people. I don't pay for Spotify. Hi everyone. I'm getting some mixed results here in the chat. I'm hearing that some people are not hearing the music in Zoom, but I think some of you are. Ian, did you say you heard the music? Okay, you're muted, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Max,
Oh, here we go.
yeah.
Yes, I was hearing the music.
We're gonna have to figure that out. Lots of folks were saying they were not hearing the music. So that's confusing to me, but it's hardly important right now as long as you can hear my voice right now, and ultimately the most important voice of today is who is our speaker. But first, let's get the rock and roll business out of the way. Charlie Mossbrook, I am so glad you're here. Do you mind watching the waiting room while I do my chat so I don't have to? Thank you. Awesome. Welcome to Farm Virtual Connections and our Tuesday Tech Talks. This is, I should be counting because we've been doing these since I think May. And if you're here for the first time, please welcome. I think I saw a few new names. I know that we've got a lot of regulars who show up every week, but I think I saw a few new names in here. And so I'm excited to have you, Maurice. um, and the rest of you. We are going to run this like we always do, which is a 30-minute talk from our presenter today and then a follow up with Q&A. So during the talk, you can chat questions directly to me. I'm going to ask you to chat those directly to me because we don't want to distract Ian, and Charlie is also a host. So I think you can only chat directly to me, but just in case. Or if you prefer, you can ask your questions yourself when the time comes, and you can do that by using the raise hand feature, which you'll find in one of two places, depending on where your Zoom app is updated to. How is that for coherent? So if you have a very recent version of Zoom, they have moved the raise hand feature down to the reactions place down in the bottom of your screen. If you're on a computer, you'll have this reactions option, and you will have I'm sorry, I got distracted by the chat just now. You can do the raise hand. There's a big, huge bar that says raise hand. If you have an older version of Zoom, you will find the little blue hand in the lower left corner of the participant window. And let's see, somebody in the window is saying new, open to chat to all three. Okay, so I think that must mean that you can currently chat to any one of the hosts, the host and co-host, but unless you have something specific you want to say to them, I'm going to ask you to chat your questions, your direct questions to me, and I will make sure that they get chatted out. In the meantime, I think that's all I have to tell you about right now. You are not able to unmute yourselves at this point, so we'll definitely let you unmute yourself when the time comes if you want to ask a question. And without further ado, I need to introduce you to our speaker today. I'm going to add you into the spotlight here, my friend, because I like looking at the person I am talking about. Ian Gorman, I think I met you at one of my very first farms. I'm pretty sure that farm is the reason we know each other.
I think so.
It always makes me so happy. And at the time, I think I knew you mostly as a musician. And you are a multi-instrumentalist and a really wonderful band leader. And the Red Sea Pedestrians, who you were, I'm sadly maybe not listening to during the opening sequence there, I encourage you to look them up. They're one of my favorite Michigan bands, really just stellar, wonderful music, unique. And but Ian has also made a really big name for himself, certainly around the Michigan area, as recording engineer. I remember people talking about you doing remote engineering. It was like, you want Ian to come over to your location and record your show. Now he's got his own studio, La Luna Recording and Sound. His bio speaks volumes more than I can, but he has certainly made a name for himself as a producer, recording engineer. He's putting out some beautiful music, and so he comes with some great credibility to tell you all about how to set up your own home recording, because I'm pretty sure that's how he started. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ian Gorman.
Thanks, Annie. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. Yes, I absolutely started out recording at home. I did that for quite a number of years on a cassette 4-track for many years with, I was always the guy in my bands to, do all that stuff. Had a couple of mics and the cassette deck, and, was also the one obsessively like putting up flyers and, writing set lists and all that, stuff. I'm that guy in most bands that I'm in. Did it just for fun. I mean, I still do it for fun, but just for fun for quite a number of years, until in college, I started taking classes about it, originally to just learn more about it for myself as a musician. I wanted to get more out of the studio, understand it better, make better recordings, because I loved being in the studio. And very quickly, I got completely obsessed with it in college with the classes of John Campos, if anyone knows him, and his fine band, the Cornfed Girls. He's a fantastic audio educator here in Kalamazoo. And very quickly it became my obsession. I was hanging out in the studio all the time and just making records any chance I get. And now, a couple decades down the line, I'm still doing that, thankfully. As Annie said, I have a studio here in Kalamazoo called La Luna Recording. In addition to recording, mixing, and mastering, we also do audio workshops and lessons. And during normal times, we have events and stuff like that in the studio, but obviously not so much right now. So, this is an intro to home recording. We only have about half an hour to talk here, which is nothing for the topic. So I'm just going to be giving a very brief, very basic intro. The stuff I prepared here is geared towards people that are at a total basic level. If you have more advanced questions and that kind of thing, great. We can get into that in the question time, but just a heads up that the stuff I'm talking about here is on the more basic level, but always good to go over that anyway. So, okay. Getting started with home recording. First off, a really important just kind of overall philosophy about it. A lot of people get intimidated by the recording process and are afraid to get into it because of how complicated it could be. Or inversely, they think that it's super easy because the person at Guitar Center told them all they needed was $100 worth of gear and they could make world-class records. Neither one of these things are entirely true. It's a lot more like being a musician in that it is a lifelong skill and passion, but you don't necessarily need to get that deep into it to be able to do some really good basic things. For instance, it doesn't take you that long to learn how to play a G, C, and D chord and be able to start writing some straight ahead tunes. But if you want to be able to do a rip and bluegrass solo, that's going to take some time and practice. And audio engineering and production is very much the same way. You can get as deep into it as you want to, and you can make it a lifelong obsession of, intense scrutiny, or you can learn some basics to complement the skill set you already have as a musician. It can be a great thing to do just for demoing, songwriting, that sort of thing. You can get a little deeper into it and do it at more of a quality level where you can record your own albums, or you can complement the recordings you're doing at other studios. For instance, I work with a lot of musicians that will come to the studio for the big, complicated sessions, but then they have a setup at home that they can record their vocals and do overdubs themselves and that kind of thing. If any of you are familiar with the musician Andy Baker, who's one of my favorites, him and I did a record last year called North Country Sky that we did very much that way. He recorded his own guitar and vocals at home, and we did the rest of it and mixed it at the studio. And it's a great way to not only save your budget while you're working, which is important for everybody, but also it can be a great vibe to sit in your own living room and cut your vocals, that kind of thing. On top of that, it can be a great skill to have for studio musician work. I know a lot of people that, especially now with the pandemic and social distancing, that you can send them tracks, they'll put their overdubs on it and send it back to you. So that can be a great kind of way to diversify your skill set and make a few extra bucks. So anyway, what do you need? The basics are you need a recording program of some sort, and there's a million out there. A lot of times these are called DAWs, D-A-W, which stands for Digital Audio Workstation. There's a lot out there that range from super cheap or free to incredibly expensive. And that's the truth for all audio gear, basically. Some real common ones that I highly recommend, if you're on a Mac, Logic Pro X is a really fantastic one. It's about $200, which in the audio world is very cheap. People do some really high quality pro stuff on it. A lot of big records are done in Logic. So I highly recommend that. For PC, I recommend one called Studio One. I don't know the cost of it, but somewhere in that ballpark. I know a lot of people that do great work with that too. Now there's a million other ones out there. There's a lot of great ones. Pro Tools is the one that I use. That's a higher end one that you'll find at a lot of professional studios, but it's very expensive. GarageBand is a free one that is great if you're on a Mac, but it's also very limited. And I would say if you've got the budget for it, start learning Logic now. If I was starting over, honestly, I'd probably start with Logic, but at this point I'm 25 years deep into Pro Tools and I don't want to relearn all those skills and speeds that I have with it. So anyway, so you need a DAW, you need a recording program of some sort, and you also need an audio interface. What's an audio interface? Long story short, it's a way to get a microphone or some other kind of input into your computer. Now, your computer might have an auxiliary input already, but that's very limited in what it's useful for, and it's usually really low quality compared to an audio interface. And when I say it's limited in what it's useful for, you usually can't plug a microphone directly into it. Which obviously is going to do you no good. So let me see if I got the cable length here to show you the interface I'm using today. Here we go. This right here is an audio interface. This is an Audient ID14, and it's a very basic one in terms of audio gear. It's a nice quality one, but it's basic. It's got two microphone inputs here that you'll see. I'm plugged into one of them, of course. It's got some speaker outputs. Here's the... Sorry, I'm doing this backwards. Here's the USB cable that goes to my computer. And you'll see here it's got a volume knob for your listening, as well as what we call mic preamp volumes. That's short for mic preamplifier. You don't need to get into all the details and understand deeply all of that stuff. The bottom line is that microphones are very quiet, and you need what's called a preamplifier, a mic preamp, to get it up to line level. There's mic level, which is real quiet, then line level. It says preamplifier, that's the name of it, but really it's an amplifier. It's making it louder. But anyway, those come in a ton of varieties, ton of price points, and they all color the sound in different ways. And some of the really fancy ones will set you back a fortune. But you don't need a fancy one to record at home. Just make sure that if you're trying to record a microphone that you have a mic preamp. And most interfaces will have one built in. What kind of interface do you need? Once again, a world of options there. The big question is, how many inputs do you need? And that depends on what you're doing. A lot of them come with 2 inputs. Some of the really entry-level ones only come with 1, and then a lot come with a lot more. That's a question of what you're recording and what you're using it for. 2 microphone inputs could be great if you're just doing like a guitar and a vocal, or you're doing a guitar and stereo. Stereo is 2 channels, a left and a right. And so you need at least 2 channels to record anything in stereo, like putting 2 microphones on an acoustic guitar. And that's an aesthetic choice, whether you want to do stereo or mono. And we could, debate that all day. But the point is, if you have 2 inputs, that could be a vocal and an instrument, or just an instrument in stereo, or, 2 instruments, anything like that. If you want to get into more complicated stuff, you might want to look at an interface that has more inputs, which will obviously be more money, but give you more flexibility. Also, of course, you need a microphone or multiple microphones, depending on what you're doing. Once again, you can spend as much money as you want to on this. Anything cheaper than $100 is probably going to be pretty trashy, which, hey, it might get the job done, but just a heads up. If you're looking at a mic under $100, it's probably not going to, blow you away. Or you can spend a lot of the most famous microphones of all time are the price of a nice car. So you can spend as much as you want to spend, for sure. And of course, one of the benefits going to a fancy studio is they'll have all that stuff. But anyway, there's a lot of different kinds of microphones out there. Obviously, this right here that I'm talking into is a Shure SM58. I'm sure you recognize these because they are all over the place in the live sound world. It's a good, solid microphone that's about $100. It's not going to compete with the really fancy high-end stuff, but it'll get the job done a lot of the time. There's also a Shure SM57, which I'm sure you'd recognize. I don't have a picture in front of me, but it's very much like this, except instead of the ball on top, it's just a cylinder. And those are very well-known microphones for all kinds of instruments, guitar amps, that kind of thing, if you're getting electrified. Great entry-level mics that are really reasonable, that are really sturdy, they'll last you a long time. If you want to get deeper into it, I also highly recommend a mic called the Shure SM7. This is not the same as a 57. It's just a 7. Oh, Annie's got one right there. Yeah, you'll see this all the time in music videos, podcasts, all kinds of stuff. It's about $350, $400 somewhere in there, which, is not chump change, but in the studio world is very reasonable compared to what you can get into. And it is a famous vocal microphone. It was famously used on Thriller. Michael Jackson used it on Thriller. It was used on a lot of Wilco recordings, all kinds of stuff, a million records. So if you're looking to get more into it, I love the 57, and sometimes it'll beat out a microphone many times the cost. Just a little aside here about microphones. Hold on a second. I just got to do one thing here. Give me just a second. All right. Everybody still got me? Cool. I have a little setting I have to reset once in a while for reasons I won't go into right now. Something to keep in mind about microphones, just real quick, is that a lot of times when you're starting out, you ask the question, well, what microphone is good for voice? What microphone is good for guitar? And the unfortunate truth is it doesn't really work like that. I mean, there are starting points that are real common that can be a good place to start, but they're different tools, they're different flavors, they're different tones. And this is where the art comes in of recording. And there's a relationship between a microphone and a singer or a sound source that microphone A might sound great on singer A and really emphasize things that are really beautiful in their voice. And it might sound horrible on person B and bring out stuff that's really nasty in their voice. So there is no magic, this mic is good for this. There are mics that are solid and dependable and probably a safe bet, but there is, it's really a game of mixing and matching. And that's one of the reasons studios have so many different mics. So, I can certainly give you some starting points, but just, it's good to have that attitude. And I remember when I got started, I thought that, I'm going to take a recording class and learn what microphone to put on a snare drum to get a good snare sound. And it's not like that. It's a moving target, and it's a matter of having a skill set. As John Campos, my great audio teacher and friend who I mentioned earlier, who I quote a lot because he's such a great teacher, he put it this way. It's like going into someone's workshop going, well, what's your favorite tool? And the answer is like, well, what's the job? What are we doing here? I'm going to prefer a different tool if we're building a deck than if we're, re-roofing the garage. So it's the same thing with microphones. Okay. Some more things to think about with the recording process. So big picture, the recording process is split up into 3 parts: tracking, mixing, and mastering. Tracking is the recording process. It's playing your instrument into a microphone or a direct input, which I didn't mention, but I'll talk about that in a minute. Performing, whether it's performing live, whether it's doing overdubs, as in layering stuff after the fact. 1 second here. All right. Long story short, I am using a trial version of a piece of software that's allowing me to route the audio how I want here, and it stops every few minutes. I have to restart it. I'm being cheap today. What can I say? Okay. Tracking is the recording process, and some people record all live, all at once. Other people will layer stuff. Some musicians, and there's no right or wrong. There are benefits and drawbacks both ways, but it's a personal choice. If you're a guitarist singer, and I bet a lot of you are, some people are super comfortable playing and singing at the same time, and separating those two totally blows their mind and they can't do it. You're always playing guitar while you're singing. It'd be really hard to just play guitar on your song without singing. It'd be hard to sing it without playing the instrument. And so some people want to record both at the same time. Great. Awesome. Other people really benefit from separating it. Oh, I can play guitar a lot better while I'm not singing. So I'm just going to lay down the guitar track and I'm going to overdub the voice on top of it. No right or wrong. Like I say, there are benefits and drawbacks both ways, but whatever gives you the best performance and the most comfortability, that's the most important thing. Who cares about the technical benefits or drawbacks if the performance sucks, right? So do what you're comfortable with. If you really want to get into the studio, getting comfortable overdubbing is a really important skill to have. But if you're recording yourself, do it the way that you're comfortable and that you're happiest with the results. Okay, tracking, the recording process. Then there's mixing, which is after you've done recording, you're playing back your recording and you're messing with the sounds. You're messing with the EQ, the compression, reverb, all that stuff, which if we have time, I'll demonstrate a little bit. Although, of course, in my typical way, I'm rambling on here and I might run out of time, but you're messing with the sound. You're messing with the balances, the volumes between the different instruments. And this has a lot to do with why great records sound the way they do, because people took the time to finesse all of these balances. And in finessing the balances, the volumes between the different instruments, another thing that is very common is called automation, which is more of an advanced thing, but it's good to understand what automation is. It's changing and programming the volumes throughout the song. You know, oh, the singer gets really loud on the chorus. We need to dial that back just a bit. Oh, this word is a little bit quiet. We're going to bump that up. Professional sounding recordings have a ton of attention laid to the details like that. And so it's important to know if you're not doing that, might be totally fine. But if you're comparing yourself just playing into a microphone versus a high-end production where all of the attention's applied to those details, that might be the difference that you're hearing as much as anything else. So don't be afraid to get into those details. A lot of times, those are the things that can really take a recording to the next level. So messing with all of the balances, finessing the tones. And then finally, mastering, which is its own thing, but basically it's a final polishing step to take your mix and make it sound, prepare it for professional release, both sonically and technically. Mastering is its own workshop. There's no way I could get into all of that right now, but the bottom line is be aware of its existence as part of the process and don't release music that isn't mastered. Get your music mastered because it's going to make a huge difference in the way that it sounds out in the world. Mastering is basically taking something and making it sound better out in the world, which is where we want our music to be heard, right? Cool. So those are the three main parts of the process there. Something that I really highly recommend about thinking about the recording process from the beginning is that, in my opinion, great recordings are made in sound check, not in the mix process. And what I mean by this is that having the right microphone in the right spot for what you're recording is going to make a bigger difference than any knob you're going to turn later. And when I say the right spot, mic placement is very important to the sound that we're getting. And all you need to do to demonstrate this for yourself is take your guitar, put a microphone in front of it, put on some headphones, and start to move the microphone around. And you will get a world of different sounds, even with one microphone on your instrument. Now, this can be intimidating because it's like, well, where do I put this mic? But the thing is, it can also be really empowering because you can get a whole variety of sounds with one microphone by messing with where it is placed on the instrument. And so you don't necessarily need a lot of gear to get a lot of different sounds. For instance, well, I don't know how much this will come through here while we're talking, but what if I just move this off my voice right here? I'm just kind of moving the microphone around, how it's pointing at me, how far away I am, and it'll get a lot of different sounds and a lot of different volumes. And you'll hear this even more on an instrument. So think about that if you can at the beginning, because the right mic in the right spot is always going to sound better than the wrong mic with a bunch of knobs turned later on. So, I highly recommend taking a little time right up at the top to do a little listening back, make sure the basic sounds you're getting are good. It's a lot like cooking. If your ingredients are fresh, the whole meal is going to turn out better. And if your ingredients are stale, yeah, you can help it with a pile of salt, but it's not going to be the same. So just keep that in mind. And I mentioned that because I see a lot of people that just think, oh, I'll put whatever mic anywhere and we'll mix it and make it sound great later. And to me, that's a real mistake. It can make your life a lot harder and not get the results quite as well. Okay, let's see here. Annie, how are we doing on time? We only got a few minutes left, it looks like. Is that true?
Sorry, I just had to unmute myself because I'm writing my own questions down.
Okay. Cool.
You're good. You got another 5-10 minutes.
Okay.
If you want. I mean, it's up to
Great.
you. We got more stuff to cover.
Yeah, cool. Well, I'll get into a few more things. Okay. A couple things about microphones here real quick. One is the concept of bleed or spill, as the British say, because they're more dignified than us Americans. What is this? Bleed is so say that you have two people both recording at the same time. You have a guitarist and an upright bassist. The microphones, if people are together in the same room near each other, their microphones are going to pick up each other as well. The upright bass is going to bleed into the guitar mic and vice versa. This is fine. I mean, it's an inherent situation for recording live. And if you're playing guitar and singing, the guitar is going to bleed into your vocal mic and the vocal is going to bleed into the guitar mic. The important thing is to be aware of this phenomenon and think about if it's a problem or not, and if so, make some adjustments. This is a class into itself, but the big thing is getting closer on the mic. If you move the mic really far away from you, it's going to be getting more of the other instrument and less of the one you're pointing it at. So sometimes you got to mic things real up close just to cut down on the bleed of other instruments, or make sure you're singing real close into the vocal mic so it's getting much more of your voice than the guitar that you're playing and that kind of thing. It's a good thing to be aware of at the beginning. And some bleed is fine. Some people get really obsessed with trying to separate everything because there are technical benefits to not having any bleed and just having the vocal mic be nothing but vocals. The bass mic be nothing but bass. And yes, there's a lot of technical benefits to that. But great recordings have been made with people in the same room since the dawn of time. And once again, the performance is more important. If the vibe of everyone playing together in a circle leads to a better performance and separating everybody, do it that way. You know, technical hurdles are nothing compared to the why we do this, which is for the music. But it's a good thing to be aware of and be mindful of if you're recording multiple sounds at once. Another thing is called proximity effect, which is basically the phenomenon where directional microphones can pick up in different directions depending on the mic, which is a whole nother thing. But directional microphones, which is the most common kind, they're also called cardioid. They get a bass boost when you get really close to the mic. That's called proximity effect. And you'll notice like radio announcers, that kind of thing, they'll like get right up on the mic so they can get that low, silky tone. And then if you get back off the mic, it removes the proximity effect and removes some of the bass response. This is a great tool to have in your toolbox just for putting up a mic on something and performing into it. If you want the voice to sound bigger, get closer to the mic, get some of that proximity effect going. If you're getting a lot of boominess, back off a little bit. It'll clean up the sound a little bit. Also, the direction that the microphone is pointing is really important. You're doing the kind of thing where everybody's around the same mic together. The person on the side is going to be quieter than the person that the mic mic is pointing at. So be mindful of this stuff, the directionality, the proximity effect, all that good stuff. Okay, real quick, I want to demonstrate a few real common audio tools. I'm going to reset my little free trial program here. 1 second. All right, I should be back on, and then let's get my. So I use the program Pro Tools to record. There are a million different recording programs, and at the end of the day, they all do really similar things. The analogy that I like to say, which maybe I already said, is that they're like cars. You're getting into a car you've never been in before. It's got to have some headlights somewhere, and it's got to have a radio dial, and all of that stuff. It's got to have a windshield wiper. The question is where. What recording program you use is really secondary to the process and your approach to it. It might be named something different in a different program, or the button might be in a different place, but it's all going to do the same stuff. And if you think about the process and your approach to it, the actual recording program doesn't really matter. And what you're used to is worth a lot more than what you have. If you use what you got and get comfortable with it, that is going to give you a lot better results than spending a lot of money and getting a fancy program that you don't know that well. So, okay, let's talk about some basic audio tools here. I'm just going to play this for a second to make sure everybody gets this, make sure everybody's hearing this guitar here. Great. So the first thing that I want to show you is called EQ. Short for equalization. This is a way to control the tone of the instrument, the lows, the mids, the highs. You can do this with a broad brush stroke approach. You can do this very surgically to get rid of a certain frequency that's bothering you. There is no right or wrong. This is very much an art and a matter of taste. But let me just show you here. So we'll play this guitar, and the first thing I'll do is kind of mess with bringing up some highs. Oh, getting error messages because my little laptop's doing a million things. Normally, I do these presentations from our studio where we got a souped up computer and got all this stuff dialed in, but there's another session up there today, so I'm kind of finagling my home laptop to do all this here. So anyway, this is an example of brightening a sound. Now, if you're listening through Zoom, Zoom's got low quality audio. You may not be able to hear these differences as well as if you're in the studio. But let's see. So I'll play this again. Hopefully we won't get that error message, and I'll show you the difference in brightening something up or not. Error messages. Let me see here if I can improve this for everybody. Nope. Okay, we'll just deal for right now. So this is with no EQ. And then some brightness. And there's all kinds of things you can do. I can sweep this around. Really emphasizing that bass. And you can do a combination of stuff. You can raise up the high end. You can raise up the low end. You can duck a frequency. So EQ is a way to control the tone of your instruments. You'll see here I use a lot of plugins by a company called FabFilter. You can use the ones that come with your program. A lot of those work great, but I love FabFilter stuff. There's a lot of benefits to it. Here's another example here of compression. And I just want to bring up a little graph here real quick. So here's what compression does. Long story short, beyond the threshold, you set the threshold at a certain volume point. Okay, compression is dealing with volume, quiet to loud, your dynamic range. That's what we call kind of the range of quiet to loud. And compression is squashing that dynamic range. Most music that we hear produced and on the radio and on records has some compression in it. There's no rules, not necessarily everything, but it's super common, especially on voices. And compression can shorten that dynamic range so that the quiet words and that kind of thing come out a lot more than the loud words. And you'll see here you can control not just where the compressor is kicking in, where the volumes, the volume crosses the threshold and it starts compressing, but you can also slightly compress something. You can really dramatically compress something. In the interest of time, I'm not going to get any deeper into that, but I'll just show you a quick example here. So we got a voice here. Let's check out this voice right here. So you'll see here, you can look at this waveform. This voice goes from quiet to loud. Let's listen to a little bit of it.
And the snow is thawing. Remember that I love you still.
so that one line gets a lot louder than the line before. Let's pop on a little compression and even that out.
And the snow is thawing. Remember that I love you still. Should summer come.
So that's evening out the volume from quiet to loud. Some compression can be awesome to really help even something out and make it sound really present and in your face. Too much of it can really start to sound unnatural. So you want to watch out for that. Finally, we're about at the end here of my spiel, but I just want to show you reverb real quick. Reverb is a sense of space that we add to the sound. And this is done in many different ways, but here's a little bit of reverb on this voice.
Think of me when winter comes and the snow is falling.
Reverb off.
Think of me when winter comes.
Yeah, so you'll hear here, there's a lot of different ways to do reverb. And sometimes it's real obvious, a big reverb like this, but something that is used all the time in recordings is a super subtle reverb. A lot of times you don't want to sound like you got a bunch of digital effects on it, especially in the roots world. A lot of times we want things to sound really natural, but you also don't want it to necessarily sound super clinical, like someone is just singing in a deadened room or something. So a lot of times we'll use tiny little short reverbs.
Think of me when winter comes and the snow is falling.
Back off.
Think of me when winter comes. Think of me when winter comes.
So don't be afraid of reverbs. They don't necessarily make everything sound produced and poppy. A lot of times they can just add some three-dimensionality and a little space around stuff. And that stuff is super common. It is unbelievable how many times I watch a video of someone dissecting a mix that they've done. You can find all this on YouTube, which is incredibly informative. And you're like, wow, there's like that vocal's really dry. And then they'll dissect and go, oh no, they're doing a ton of little tiny things. And when they pop it on and off, it sure makes a difference. So a lot of times in the audio world, we're doing subtle little stuff like that. Cool. I think that we are, I could go on and on for hours about this. And if anybody is interested in delving deeper in, just a little ad for myself, I do private lessons and all kinds of stuff like that too. And I'm happy to dive as deep as you want into any topic here, but I think it's probably time to end my spiel and start taking some questions. Does that sound good, Annie?
That sounds great. And actually, I'm going to
right.
drop your links just real quick right now in the chat for those. There's both the studio and the band, which I think you should check out just because I'm guessing that Ian produced those records.
I did, but with help from others. Recording and playing an instrument at the same time are kind of two different parts of my brain. And so when we record, we will hire someone else to help during the basic band tracking session, just so I don't have to wear both hats necessarily. But as you might imagine, I'm very hands-on and I've got a lot of ideas. But then I'll usually mix and overdub and produce from that point on.
I can't imagine that you'd be hands-on. Of course you are. Ian, we have a ton of questions. They were coming in as we were going. So I'll
try to keep it brief as best I can.
I'm going to lay them in because I know Brianna's got a question. She's got her hand up and she's going to ask it herself. So we'll prop you in there somewhere in between some of these other questions here. So hopefully a lot of these are fairly quick. When you were talking about initially the preamp, how does the preamp term differ from gain as you were describing? This was the first question that came in. In the real world, they're pretty interchangeable. You can get into the details of the differences, but if you got a gain knob, it's often the same thing as a preamp on most entry-level pieces of equipment. Basically, I was talking about microphones are quiet and line levels are louder. The preamp or the gain gets the microphone up to line level, and then you can mix from there. Yeah. So it's probably the same. Good. Cool. Okay. How do you feel about Ear Trumpet Labs?
Depends. Is someone from Ear Trumpet asking?
Well, I'm talking to you from one, and I can tell you, like, as I showed you my SM7, this is not my question. It was, and I apologize. I just copied and pasted the questions real quick, and I can't remember who was asking these, but, you were talking about some mics, and I think the follow-up question was also, can you recommend any USB mics, like, for example, Blue Yeti? And just to tack on, when you were talking about the audio interfaces, I think we've done enough of our tech talks about live streaming and audio interfaces. There are a bunch of different, like Focusrite and different audio interfaces that people are already using right now for live streaming and maybe don't even realize I don't want to insult anyone's intelligence, but I didn't necessarily connect the dots between that audio interface and the one that I was using previously for home recording. So that was great. I also posted the link on that. But yes, so Ear Tracker Labs, yeah.
Yeah, my opinion, the ones that I've heard, I don't love. I think they look way cooler than they sound, if I'm being honest. I think if they didn't look the way they did, they wouldn't be so popular. But I haven't heard all of them. I've heard the Arduino, which is the most famous common one. But it's so subjective. It's not really my thing. I don't love the sound of the ones that I've heard myself. And I think there's a lot better sounding mics out there than the Arduino myself. But it's so subjective. And a mic that one person loves, another person might hate. So I'm not the judge. But in my opinion, there's they sure do look great, but I don't necessarily love the sound of the ones that I've heard.
You wouldn't necessarily use it for recording.
No, definitely not. Hold on, I got to reset my trial here.
Is that what the hissing is?
Yeah.
Funny. All right, we're gonna have to find out about that.
So it's not my thing, but if you love the sound of it, awesome. Don't listen to me.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Back to the USB mics, and this is more of probably more of a live streaming. But if somebody has a Blue Yeti, would they use that for a home recording?
Yeah, a Blue Yeti is a good one. Check out Rode, Rode. They make a lot of really nice mics for really accessible price points, and they have a USB mic. Usually, a USB mic is not going to be as good as a dedicated mic and an interface. The general rule in the audio world is something that does one thing is going to do that better than something that does everything. But it also depends on your purpose. And a USB mic might totally do the trick. And there's a lot of good ones out there. Blue is a good one. Rode is a good one. I'm sure there's a lot more I don't even know.
Yeah, Rode has been brought up before. I just found this one. I'm Googling these things as you bring them up. So very cool. The single mic technique, let's see, the single mic technique was born out of necessity, right? So they only had one, but it was a great mic. This is more common than anything. I think somebody chopped that in there.
Yeah. So my opinion on the one mic approach, I love it for live. It is awesome. It's a great performance thing. The responsibility is hugely on the musicians, and it is not as easy as it looks. I've played in bands that have done the one mic thing, and it's super fun, but you really have to rehearse your distances from the mic and your choreography and your movement. Your position of the mic greatly impacts the sound and the volume of what you're doing. And so it's not as easy as we put a mic in front of the band and we just played and it sounded great. The bands that are really good at it have really refined their skills to work that microphone and mix themselves. And the great benefit is if you get good at that, no sound guy can mess it up. And we've all had to deal with sound people that either don't understand acoustic music, which is really common, or people that, naturally they just don't know our songs. They don't know the mandolin solos coming up. They don't know who's got the harmony that's supposed to be tucked in versus the really prominent one, and you can't expect them to unless they're your sound person and they work with you all the time. So working the one mic thing, if you can get good at it, it's a great skill to have for live and as a survival tool to make sure your mix sounds good and just the choreography is awesome and audiences love it. I don't really care for it in the studio. I really like having some mixability control, and it's the kind of thing where it's not infrequent that a band will say, hey, can we just throw up one mic and record? Sure, but there's not a lot I can do with it. If you didn't stand the right distance from the mic or you moved in the middle of something, you're stuck with it. And having that individual control is really beneficial. I'm not a big fan of the one mic thing. Occasionally having some harmony singers around one mic can be a cool vibe in the studio. But even then, I like being able to control the mix in the studio. So that's my opinion. But once again, take this all with a grain of salt. You might love it and it might sound great for you and really suit your style.
Yeah, awesome. Okay. Before I move to the next typed question, I'm going to ask Brianna to unmute herself and ask your question, my dear.
Hi. I'm really debating between getting this USB mic, but there's the Pro level that has the XLR input.
Yep.
That I just don't know if I need, because I'm just looking for your opinion, because I don't have an interface yet. I feel like it's just, I don't know. I don't have an interface yet. I feel like it's just, I don't know. I don't have an interface yet. I feel like it's just, I don't know. I don't have an interface yet. I feel like it's just, I don't know. I don't have an interface yet. I feel like it's just, I don't know. I don't have an interface yet. I feel like it's just, I don't know. I don't have an interface yet. I feel like it's just, I don't know. I don't have an interface yet. I feel like it's just, I don't know. I don't have an interface yet. I feel like it's just, I don't know. I don't have an interface yet. I feel like it's just, I don't know. I don't have an interface yet. I feel like it's just, I don't know. I don't have an interface yet. I feel like it's just, I don't know. I don't have an interface yet. I feel like it's just, I don't know. I don't have an interface yet. I feel like it's just, I don't know. I don't have an interface yet. I feel like it's just, I don't know. I don't have an interface yet. I feel like it's just, I don't know. I don't have an interface yet. I feel like it's just, I don't know. I don't have an interface yet. I feel like it's just, I don't know. I don't have an interfa going to be me and this microphone for a while.
Yeah. Are you, what are you recording? Voice or voice and guitar? I see a beautiful looking guitar behind you.
Voice and guitar, yeah.
Are you recording them at the same time or separately?
Depends on my mood, I suppose.
Yeah. So if you're recording them separately, then yeah, you could just use the mic for each. If you're recording, you play the guitar into the mic and then you sing into the mic. If you're doing both at the same time, that can be tricky. You could find a balance where you can put that one microphone in a position that picks up the guitar and voice at a nice level, but then you're not going to have any control over it. If you're just demoing tunes, that kind of thing, that could work great. So I guess, long story short, if you need more than one microphone, then yeah, you might want to look at getting some more gear. But if one mic at a time does the trick, that might be all you need. So are you borrowing that? Do you already have that? Or
no, I'm borrowing it. So I'm making
Yeah.
the leap to buy something real soon. And I just don't want to regret not getting an XLR.
Yep. Well, the difficulty is if you get one with the XLR connection, you're going to need another interface. So that means more money and more stuff you got to buy.
I feel like it could snowball real fast.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. My opinion, without knowing you and knowing what you're doing at all, I would say start with that. You can always upgrade from there.
Thank you.
Got it. Cool. All right. Thank you. And we are on to, so this is Sherry's question. I do remember this one. She said she's a few years into home studio with so-so results. Is it realistic for her as a singer-songwriter hobbyist to achieve a studio quality sound with mid-level recording gear and self-mixing mastering? Or should I save my time/money to have a professional do it for me? I love this question so much.
Right. Well, it's hard to say without hearing what you're doing. You know what I mean? I guess, yeah, it's hard to say just kind of in theory. I know a lot of musicians that love recording themselves at home, and they will work in combination with a studio. So it doesn't necessarily have to be all one or the other. You can go to a professional studio to like record the drums or, record a bunch of instruments on fancy microphones. And then if you got a mic that you like the sound of on your voice, do your vocals at home, do harmonies, do overdubs. I work with some singers that will do the lead vocal on a fancy mic at my studio, but then the harmonies are less exposed. And so maybe they do those at home. They spend a lot of time off the clock, open yourself up to those kind of collaborative possibilities. And these days it's so easy to just throw files back and forth with studios. The big question is, are you happy with the sound of what you're doing? If you're happy with the sound of what you're doing, then, if it ain't broke, right? If you're struggling with it and you feel like it's just not sounding the way you want it to, then it might very well be worth your while to go to a studio or to like invest in a nice microphone. You could go on and on about the different levels of gear and different options with that, but nothing's going to make a bigger difference in your sound than the quality of the microphone that you're using. And so you might even want to consider just investing in a nice vocal mic. And, you can always record yourself at home. You go to a professional studio to mix, or you can mix yourself and go to a professional studio to master. There's all kinds of different combinations. So it doesn't have to be either or. So yeah, it's a hard question to answer without hearing what you're doing. But I guess the bottom line is, are you happy with the sound or not? And if not, then yeah, maybe keep trying to, whether it's upgrading your gear or whether it's going to a professional studio. Right. But if you are happy, then great. Keep doing it.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head too, and I'm just going to interject anecdotally. Sherry, she followed up with recording vocals at home is liberating, and for the last 5 records that we've made, we've done most of it in the studio, but I am always more comfortable recording my vocals at home because with that clock ticking and me feeling like I'm not, so it has been my saving grace. But I'm like one of those people that went, I don't want to learn this stuff. I want somebody who knows what they're doing to do it for me. And I love the recording studio and that. But the anecdotal thing I was going to say is other friends of ours invested in the Pro Tools and had a space in the room, and they hired a studio guy who knew stuff to come to their house and consult with them to do the setup, and that was an investment in a lot of things. But I think I would guess that you would do that sort of thing for folks that wanted to.
Oh yeah, and I mean, at risk of just being an advertisement here, yes, I do that all the time. I do private lessons, whether they're at sometimes there's benefits to someone coming to my studio and seeing how things are done on that level, and other times I will work with people on their gear and help them figure out how to make the most of what they have. Yeah, and there are all kinds of ways to interface recording at home with a professional studio. And you can record yourself at home, then bring it to a professional studio and mix. You can go to a professional studio and use that fancy gear, and then bring the files home to mix yourself at home off the clock, that kind of thing. So to find whatever solution suits you and the people you're working with. There's a lot of different ways to approach it.
Yeah. Okay, so one person, this was Christopher. See, I'm starting to remember names. Christopher mentioned something about talking about the space where recording occurs. How to avoid
Yes.
unwanted.
Yeah, this is huge. The sound of the room they're recording in is really key. And once again, this is subjective. Some people want a really dead, dry, or maybe better phrases would be intimate kind of sound. Other people want a lot of room sound and that kind of thing. That is very subjective. But the most important thing for both recording and for mixing is to make sure that your room is set up in a way that sounds as good as it can. And getting into the details of that are more than we probably have time for. But look up online stuff about acoustic treatments, and you can buy fancy stuff, but you can make stuff super cheap, and it's really easy to make. I suck at that stuff, and I've made most of it for my studio. And when I say suck at that stuff, I mean suck at building things and all that, but it's really easy to do. And man, it makes a difference. If the sound of your room is treated and your speakers are placed correctly and that kind of thing, it makes every piece of equipment you have sound better. And it's not very sexy. It's not like we get into audio gear because we want to spend money on fabric and wood and make little things to hang on our walls. But man, it makes a difference. And I highly recommend taking that stuff seriously. So make sure your room's set up right. Make sure it's treated right. Get some consultation from someone that knows this stuff if you're not sure how to do it. And also, feel free to mess around with different spaces in your house. I used to do a lot of recording from home and at other people's homes, doing stuff on location and stuff. And sometimes we want to put, put the drums in a nice big reverberant room and put the guitar in a smaller room and get creative. Maybe you got a stairwell that sounds great to sing in, that kind of thing. Awesome. Use your space, use what you got available to you. Watch out for the neighbors. And, but also keep in mind, if you're doing something in a really reverberant space, you're kind of committing to that sound. You cannot very easily take off reverberation later. But that's part of the art. Don't be afraid to commit to a sound. You love what it sounds like. Don't worry about doing everything surgical so you got a bunch of control later. Put some passion into it. Put some art into it. You love the sound of you singing in your shower, but bring in the mic in there. Maybe don't turn the water on, but do it. This is art. And, what was the quote? Indifference is the enemy of art, or something like that. Don't be afraid to go for a sound and do something that you really like.
Yeah. Cool. Especially if you're at home. You're just lose your time to trial and error. Yeah.
Yep. Use your space.
Hey, my friend Mike Ward. How are you, Mike?
Hey, Mike.
Hey, good. Hi, Ian. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. I can attest to Ian's talent. And my question actually dovetailed off of Brianna's. If you have that mic, like a one that goes directly into your Mac as a USB, do you still recommend an interface? Obviously, that means you can only do one mic if you're doing that. So if you want more than one, I assume then you definitely want to have an interface then.
Yeah, probably. It depends on what you're doing. One mic might be all you need. And, I'm making a generalization here, but usually USB mics are not quite as high quality as more dedicated mics and audio interfaces. Okay. There might be exceptions to that, so don't take that as gospel, but often that's the case. So maybe you want to, maybe the USB mic's doing everything you need and you're good. But if you want to expand, whether it's moving up in quality or whether it's doing something with more inputs so you can have more microphones going at once, that kind of thing, then you want an interface. I think you usually have to do one or the other. Like, really, a USB mic is a microphone with the interface built into it on a technical level. So I don't know. I could be wrong about this because I've never tried it, but I don't think you could have a USB mic and then get a second interface and use them both. Maybe you can, but you might want to research that before dropping any money on it.
Okay.
Yeah. Hey, I want to just throw in a quick note, real quick about direct inputs, DIs, plugging your guitar in, right? For those of us in the acoustic roots world, direct lines from your instrument never really sound as natural or as good as microphones. I mean, there's some really high quality ones out there that might, but for the most part, to me, it doesn't sound as natural and good. Most of the time, I like using a microphone in the studio. DIs, direct injects, this is called, are a necessary evil for live, because if you're using microphones live, as you probably all know, you can get tons of feedback issues, all kinds of problems. And sometimes in the studio, they can be cool, but most of the time, I prefer microphones in the studio. So just a little note on that. But once again, subjective. Do it to your taste.
Cool. All right, so I'm going to do a quick time check. Typically, we would wrap up in about 5 minutes, but there's enough questions that I feel like we can bump this a little bit longer if you are game.
I'm game.
I'm going to check your schedule.
This is great. I feel like I'm on a talk show.
You are. It's
All right.
really fun. And I would like to thank those who have had their hands up and their questions in the queue for waiting patiently while we get to your questions, but we are going to try and get to all of them. So sort of rapid fire in a way, if we can get through a couple of these with
I'll do my best.
options. But so
it's like the end of Wait, Don't Tell Me. Hit me.
I know, right. Rapid fire. Headphones versus monitor for mixing.
Yes. So usually monitors, speakers are, hold on. Okay. High quality speakers are often more accurate and going to tell you more than headphones, but that's assuming that you've got a well-treated room. And if you don't, headphones might be a big help to you because the room won't be coloring the sound for you. The bass response usually isn't as accurate in headphones, so watch out for that. But you're also probably going to want them for recording. So you're not playing speakers in the room. The microphones are picking up the speakers and that kind of thing. It's also, I suggest mixing your music in the same way you listen to music. And what I mean by that is I mostly listen to music on speakers, so that's how I'm comfortable mixing music. I know people that are super headphone freaks that listen to all their music in headphones. Mix music in headphones. Do both. I know I'm going on and on, but ideally you use them all and see what sound, find something that works for everything. So.
I love that. And because, honestly, I agree with you. I think both is great. And the next person would like to know about choosing monitor speakers. Right?
Yeah. So there's a million out there, a lot of choices. In the way of relatively accessible ones, the Yamaha HS series is a really solid one that's affordable, and they have a few different sizes. I'd stay away from KRK Rockets. That's a real common one and one that I used for a long time. They sound great, but the problem is you don't always want something that just sounds great because they're really hyped. They kind of scoop the sound a little bit. They take the mids down. They sound awesome, but they're not very true. And really what you want from speakers are things that are going to translate well. And sometimes that means getting some harsh truths from your speakers and that kind of thing. There's a million different kinds out there. It's really a matter of taste. Everybody's got their own favorites, but I really find the Yamaha HS series to be affordable and pretty accurate for an entry level kind of thing.
Cool. All right. Well, this is a hard one. Brant, I'm going to ask one more written question, and then you're up, buddy. This hopefully is easier. Does having a Chromebook make a difference? I
don't know what a Chromebook is.
It's a laptop computer, I believe it's a very specific kind of laptop.
I see. The type of computer doesn't really matter beyond what you're comfortable with, and quite importantly, the compatibility. There's a lot of compatibility issues you can get into in the computer world. Make sure whatever computer and operating system you have are compatible with the software that you're getting, and do your homework on that before you drop any money on anything. You're buying a recording program, make sure, and they got on their website somewhere their requirements, make sure that recording software is compatible with your computer and your operating system. Beyond that, I don't think it matters a lot.
Yeah, cool. Okay. All right, Brant, what's your question, sir?
Yeah, hey, thanks, and hi, Ian.
Hi.
Yeah, I have a home studio I've been trying to mess around with for years, and I hadn't done much in a while, but I'm thinking of trying to get back. And, I do like playing guitar and singing at the same time, especially to get the feel on the guitar, even if I don't use that vocal. Is there a way to get enough separation so that you can record the guitar and then go back and redo the vocal or punch in like that?
It's rare. If you're using microphones, chances are the guitar is going to get some voice no matter what. A tool that can be super useful for this, I mentioned earlier about how microphones can pick up from different directions. Check out figure 8 microphones. Some microphones you can switch the pattern. Some are just one or the other. The thing about figure 8 microphones is they will pick up from the front and the back, but they will reject incredibly well from the sides. And so like if I'm playing guitar and singing and I point this mic up at me, it's going to be pointing at my face, but the side will be pointing towards the guitar and get a lot of rejection from the guitar. And then I do the inverse for the guitar and position it so that the figure 8 is pointing at the guitar and the null point, as we say, the part that doesn't pick up as well, is rejecting the voice. This being said, you'll probably still get some vocal in the guitar. Occasionally, I've been able to redo a vocal. If someone's playing guitar real loud and singing kind of quiet, once in a while we've gotten away with that, but it's rare. Sometimes that's not necessarily a bad thing, because if you're doing, if you're going for natural, it can be a problem. But if you're going for something more produced, hold on.
That's awesome. It's all right. I'm a cheapskate too.
Yeah, no, I'm not paying $100 to have this thing for an hour. Sorry, what was I saying? If you're doing something more produced, a lot of times you're putting effects on the vocals anyway, doubles or delays, that kind of thing. And a little ghost of the vocal coming through the guitar might be fine in the mix. But if you're going for something natural, probably not. Really, the only way you can do that safely or assuredly is if you're using a direct output on your guitar. You could take a DI from the guitar and sing, and then your vocals probably not going to be coming through the direct unless you have a microphone in your guitar or something. But yeah, unfortunately that's a tough thing. You just gotta, but once again, the performance is more important than anything else. So do what you're comfortable with performance wise, and everything else it kind of is secondary.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thanks.
Figure 8 mics, everybody check them out. They are so useful.
Well, I wrote that
It was a revelation for me in the studio once I started using a lot of figure 8s, and it is indispensable to me. A lot of times I'll record like a bluegrass band that's all standing around in a circle, and with figure 8s, we can get great separation if we are intentional with our mic placement and setup. Not to the point that someone's muted in someone else's mic, but very drastically quieter, and we have lots of mixing capability, and man, I really love it.
Okay, I Googled figure 8. I didn't. I searched. I'm on Sweetwater's website, and I searched figure 8 mic, and the first one that popped up is a $7,000 Neumann. So let's talk.
You don't have to spend. Yeah, I mean, you can, like I say, you can choose between a nice car and a classic Neumann microphone, but there's a lot more entry level ones that can give you a lot of options too. So
Okay, yeah, it looks like Eric might have done the same thing because he's asking for a recommended figure 8. But yeah.
Geez, there's so many. I'm trying to think. Most of my figure 8s are on the more expensive side. So I'm trying to think. Off the top of my head,
in a $500 range, Royer ribbon mic.
Yeah, I mean, ribbon mics are fantastic, and most ribbons are figure 8s. The thing about ribbon mics is that they tend to be an incredibly dark sound, which can be great sometimes when you're trying to mellow something out, but sometimes it can be too much. One that I really love that's really affordable is called the Cascade Fathead. That's the name of the mic. I'm not insulting anybody here. Cascade's the company, Fathead's the name of the mic. They can sound, they're under $200 each, and they're my go-tos on guitar amps and horns and drums, a lot of things. To be honest, I don't love them on vocals. They're real kind of mid-rangey and dark, and I don't love them on vocals, but they can sound great on a lot of instruments. Mandolin, I love one on my mandolin. So that's a really good entry-level one for instruments. Not my first choice for vocals. Shure, S-H-U-R-E, they make a lot of different microphones, and they're a really trustworthy company. And I think that they have some multi-pattern microphones you can switch the pickup for. That's what multi-pattern means. In that price range, Rode, R-O-D-E, makes some really nice ones too. Audio Technica is another company. Now, it's so subjective. You might get a mic from one of these, there might be a really crappy mic from Audio Technica and a really great mic from Audio Technica. But in general, these are brands that have some good reputations. So,
So, I'm a little afraid. There's a couple of questions here. Thanks, Brant. I'm going to lower your hand now. All right. So I apologize, folks, because I do actually at this point probably I'm going to say I'm going to cut off the incoming questions because I'm having a hard time keeping up, and I'm going to just be selective about what we answer here. If your question did not get answered, I would encourage you to reach out to Ian. I'm just kidding. I'm laughing because I forgot to ask you if that was okay. But no, I'm. Why don't you, if you don't mind, Ian, I'm going to have you put your email in the chat for everybody at some point. But we are. Let's see. When throwing tracks to other producers, do you have to send them something that is already mixed? I'm assuming, or can mixing be changed at their studio? I'm assuming if you're throwing the tracks separately.
Yep. This is really subjective and it depends on the person. Most of the time when people are sending me tracks, they're sending them to me for me to mix. So usually they're not already mixed. But it depends on what you're doing. Occasionally you might be working with a producer that does want to take your mix from where you left it off and take it from there. I'd say that's rarer. And really it's a conversation you should have with your engineer or producer and find out what they want to do. Both happen pretty frequently. A little aside here about this, there's two terms you hear a lot: multi-tracks and stems. In the traditional sense, people use it. Well, let me tell you this. People use these terms wrong all the time. And I've long ago let go of trying to actually you mean this, because it doesn't matter. But stems technically are post mix. Multi-tracks are just raw files. Stems are after your volume adjustments, your EQ, and that kind of thing. The stems of a mix in a traditional sense are the kind of thing where if you sent me stems, I could just line up all my faders at 0 and I'd have your mix. It would be post volume changes, post EQ, post compression. But in the real world, people say stems when they mean multi-tracks most of the time. When people say, hey, can you send me stems? 99% of the time they mean the multi-tracks. So that's fine. Words evolve, language changes. So I'm not a stickler for that difference anymore, but sometimes it's good to differentiate. Someone asks for stems, go, do you mean just the raw multi-tracks or do you mean like after my mixing work? Right. And find out what they want. And it's also what you want. Connected to this, some people go, hey, I want to send you my tracks and did some EQ. Should I take that off? A lot of times I say, no, keep it on. If you like the sound, that's part of your sound. That's part of the artistic process. Other times, take it off. Let me redo it. I might be able to do it in higher quality. It just depends. So there you go.
Yeah. Great. Cool. Okay. This is an interesting question too. And I think you sort of alluded to this when you talked about DI versus miking an instrument. It sounds like this question is coming. I'm so sorry. Again, I didn't get the name on it, but I'm at beginner level with home recording. I've begun recording guitar tracks using DI input on my guitar, which provides a bass sound I'm not getting with the mic alone. So then mixing the DI line with, he's got a Lawton 220 mic.
Nice.
I have direct on my guitar. I'd like to be getting more of that big bass sound to the guitar without the DI and suggestions. So
yeah. So first of all, combining a DI with a microphone is a great technique. And a lot of my favorite guitar sounds I've gotten have been done that way. Just tucking in the DI a little bit, not so you notice it. It still sounds really acoustic. I hope he doesn't. I'm sure he wouldn't care about me saying this. I've worked on the last 4 Joel Mabus albums, and that's how we record his guitar. We use microphones, and the microphones are the bulk of the sound, but we take his direct and we blend it in a little bit, and man, we are happy with that tone. And hey, if it's good enough for Joel Mabus, it's good enough for me, So don't be afraid of that. There ain't no right or wrong about that. And directs for other things are super common. Electric bass, taking a direct out is a classic way of recording the electric bass that's on a million records. But if you want to get a bassier sound out of your mic, the first thing is placement. You've probably already done this, so forgive me if you have, but really mess around with different mic placements on it. Move it around, put on a set of headphones and move the mic around. You can probably find a really bassier spot to put it. It depends on the instrument in the room. A lot of times right in front of the sound hole is super bassy, sometimes too bassy, which is often why I don't always put a microphone right there. I usually don't. But maybe it's the sound you're looking for. Also, don't be afraid to change this. Sometimes the tone changes song to song. You know what I mean? You're in a different key, you're capoed up or something, and your guitar is resonating differently. The room you're in is different, something like that. Don't be afraid to use proximity effect. Get that mic closer if you can. It can be hard because you don't want to get in the way of your hands, but maybe there's some options there. There's all kinds of different ways you can do it. Maybe you look into a ribbon mic and blend the ribbon with your, I think that Lawton is a condenser mic. A lot of times, I was saying ribbons can sound great, but sometimes they're too dark and murky on their own. This is a generalization. There's a wide range of different sounds with every category of microphone, but sometimes blended in is awesome. Sometimes, for instance, I was saying that I don't like the Cascade Fathead on a voice on its own. For a long time before I had the mic collection that I had now, I would use two mics. I'd use a condenser and the Cascade Fathead next to each other and use them both on a vocalist and blend them. And the ribbon on its own sounded kind of crappy, but blended into the brighter condenser sounded beautiful. And I did a lot of records like that. So just some ballpark ideas there to try.
Cool. Awesome. All right. More rapid fire. Because I actually am right now just feeling like we have so much more to talk about on this subject, and we're going to have to do the home recording part 2 and bring you back in and talk and just really kind of keep elaborating, because this feels like an opportunity. Like maybe we just bring you back for an open Q&A where
that'd be great.
Show up with their questions and we can have, this would be awesome. So
I'd be happy to. Also, don't be afraid to hire me for lessons.
There you go. That too.
Yep.
Let's do that. What is your opinion of Reaper?
I haven't really used Reaper, so I don't have an opinion.
Okay, quick answer. Excellent. Is a small mixer with USB out better than an audio interface?
That's hard to say because it really depends on which one it is. There's a million different kinds out there. So, but in terms of is there a better quality approach to one or the other? No, not really. There's kind of two ways to do the same thing. A mixer with a USB output built in is basically just an audio interface. So.
Can you, this is good because recommending a set of headphones for mixing. I'm wearing a cheap pair of headphones because my other ones were acting funny and, but yeah, I'm curious.
Yeah. Once again, there's a million kinds out there. These I love. These are Biodynamic. What are they? DT770s. These run about $150. Which, isn't chump change, but for pro audio gear is pretty reasonable. And when you consider that you'd be making all of your audio decisions through your headphones or your speakers, it's money well spent if you can budget for it. I mean, if you've got the budget for it. Biodynamic DT770s. And they come in different impedances. You don't really need to worry about that. I've got the 80 ohms. They work great for all kinds of things. That's what I use.
I'm seeing for $139.99.
Nice.
And sorry guys, I am writing all this down. I just can't get it into the chat fast enough. So we'll try and accumulate all the stuff that Ian's been mentioning if you haven't been writing it down, and we'll just sort of throw it in a something resource file at some point. Okay. I'm going to throw in what Maurice said. Maurice is F Farms. For those of you who don't know, he's been a long time our sound guy. Like
Maurice could be doing this workshop as well as I could, I'm sure. Hey, Maurice.
Yeah, say hey, Mo. Okay, well, it's he said, FYI with microphones, especially for vocals, some music stores will let you demo a mic before buying, or find a studio with a big mic locker and try theirs, and then maybe buy one that sounded great. Right? I would imagine somebody could come to you and say, Ian, I want to pay you for a couple of hours of studio time just to test out your microphones.
Yeah, actually, a buddy of mine did that about 2 months ago for that exact same reason. The thing about microphones, this is true for all microphones and all sound sources, but especially for vocals, there is a relationship between a singer and a certain microphone where their voice just comes alive and they sound like $1 million. And that's why high-end studios have so many freaking expensive vocal microphones. It's not because they're expecting a 30-piece vocal group to come in. It's because it's all about that mix and match and finding the right mic. And it really, sometimes it's not the most expensive mic. For instance, May Earlywine, her mic of choice is a Rode NTK. It's a studio microphone. You can get one for, I think they're around $550, $500 to $600, somewhere in there. Once again, not cheap, but man, mics get a lot more expensive than that. And that mic is just money on her voice, much more so than mics many times that price. And we have tried them all on her, as you might imagine. And something about her voice, that mic just comes alive. If you see one of her live streams on Mondays with May on Facebook, that's the mic she uses. And she's used it for the last maybe half dozen albums. So yeah, as a singer, it is really worthwhile to find what mic you like and really sounds good on your voice. Maybe buy one and bring it with you. You know what I mean? If you can, I say to the studio or whatever, or if it's a live sound mic, bring your own mic. Not a bad idea, especially these days with COVID and everything, to have your own mic. Although at La Luna, we sanitize everything between sessions.
Okay. We should have a Q&A real quickly about how to sanitize a microphone, but let me just interject real quick on that. Because you mentioned, so May's using the same mic that she would use to record for her live stream, but would that same mic also work for a live performance?
No, that mic wouldn't. And the thing is, a lot of really nice studio microphones are very sensitive, which is great for the studio a lot of the time, depending on your purpose. But live can be feedback nightmares. As you may or may not know, feedback is the situation where the microphone picks up the sound of the speakers or the monitors and creates a feedback loop, which is that delightful, piercing tone that we will hear. And a lot of studio microphones can't work for live because they're too sensitive and they will feedback super easily.
Yeah. Eileen had her hand up, and I'm really sorry, Eileen. I hope that you put your hand down because your question got answered. We are going to wrap up here with this one last question because we haven't talked about keyboards at all. And the same question with regard to keyboards, like on an electric keyboard, you obviously can't put a mic on it, do you? So this person is having issues recording keyboards directly into interface. Yeah.
Oh, they're having issues. So that's normally how we record keyboards, is taking the direct outputs. Without knowing your exact setup or your issues, I'm not sure what the problem you're running into is, but that's kind of the normal way to do it. There are other ways to do it too. You can take it. You can take the output from the keyboard to an amplifier, guitar amp or bass amp or whatever, or keyboard amp if you have a dedicated one, and then you can mic that amp and do it that way. And sometimes that can be a really cool sound. But most of the time, we just take the direct outs from keyboards in the studio.
Yeah, I would think, other than like not miking an amp necessarily out of that, right?
Yep. Although I just did a session with Seth Bernard the other day. He has this wild old Casio with some speakers built into it, and we just mic'd the speakers. But we were not going for like a natural piano sound. It was some pretty out there stuff.
Great. All right. Oh my gosh, there are so much, you guys, and I'm so sorry. This is a really full and lively and wonderful discussion, as we had hoped it would be. Everybody's throwing, high fives to Ian. Of course, they're all coming directly to me, which is great. And again, I apologize if your direct question did not get answered. You can feel free to email me, and I will copy the chat. Actually, the chat may not be savable for you guys, and even if it was, you'd only get the chats that came from me because you're not seeing what other people are chatting. So I get the chats for all these, and we'll try to address any questions that didn't get addressed. But I'm going to let Ian have the last word here, and then we'll talk about getting you back another time.
Yeah. I'd love to just do a Q&A. It sounds like maybe that's something that would benefit a lot of people too. I'm going to put my email here in the chat. Feel free to get a hold of me with any questions or anything. I can't promise that I can just, answer tons of questions over email all the time, but happy to do what I can. And like I say, happy to do private lessons or all kinds of stuff with you, whatever is helpful. Thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure to do this. I'd love to do more of this. So let's set up another time sometime. Really, the thing that I would implore you is to just create with what you got. Don't worry about the gear too much. I mean, obviously, there can be quality things, there can be benefits to spending more money, blah, blah, blah. But records have been done since the dawn of time with the gear that people had available to them. And a lot of the gear that we hold in huge regard, classic, blah, 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 microphone used by the Beatles, whatever. A lot of times, that's what they had. That's why we love it, is because the music we love was done on it, not because there's anything magical about a piece of metal and wires. And so create with what you got. And if you are inspired, if you're playing a great song performed passionately, everything else is secondary. And just keep making art. Don't be held back or don't be self-conscious about what you have. Just make stuff. And especially right now, that's what we got to do, right? We can't be gigging. We can't be doing that stuff. So let's just keep creating, keep making stuff in the studio, and keep refining that art form.
Amen. I have nothing good to follow up with that except to say it's gallery view time, people. I'm removing the spotlight
Oh, man.
for a minute. And this is the moment when you can all, if you want to, open up and give your big old wavy hands here while you're all applauding and giving Ian your love. I want to remind everybody that we do this every Tuesday. And next week, we're actually shifting gears and going back to live streaming. And this is going to be a talk from Ben Potok from Fleming Artists is going to come and talk about Crowdcast. And you're pointing at Charlie. Did you know that? Oh. But yeah, this is thank you, Ian. This has been a really, really great talk. We've got lots more coming up. So please go to farmvirtualconnections.org. Please go to I'm sorry. Brianna is taking a screenshot. Okay. Yes, please go to farmvirtualconnections.org and check out what's coming up, and find us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram and everywhere else. And we've got Brianna Lane and Charlie Moshbook and Nick Thomas here, our board members who are part of this Virtual Connections Committee and helping keep all of this rolling. So let's show them some love as well. And thank you all for showing up every single week. We love it. It's been awesome. Oh, Ian, one more time with the reset. You can let go of the software.
Yeah. Hey, what can I say? I'm being cheap. Go put that money into microphones. One last thing. Annie, I saw you bounced my email to everybody. That's great. Don't miss the J in there. A lot of people miss that. And whoever Ian Gorman at Gmail is has gotten a lot of messages over the years. So don't miss the J in there. And yeah.
Nice. All right.
Thanks so much, everybody. Happy to talk more geek sometime soon.
We will. We'll get you back, Ian, soon. I appreciate it. We'll be in touch. You all are awesome. Thank you so much. And we'll see you again soon. Take care.
All right.
Bye.
Over.